You're listening to Seattle Real Estate Podcast.
Welcome back, my friends, to another episode of the Seattle Real Estate Podcast. What are we talking about today? Florida, state of Florida. Florida, so far away from Seattle, so different, so far away. Florida is on track to implement an anti-riot law that would include requiring state approval for decreases to city police budgets and make it a mandatory 6 months if you assault a cop during a peaceful protest. Whew. Stuff going on in Florida. Oh, Florida. Had that crazy spring break there in South Beach, Miami. Now you've got this. You got the anti-riot law. Some good stuff. They're actually doing something about it. Interesting. And I bet you they'll have less rioting. I would imagine. They're just not going to tolerate it. It's what we're going to get into today in this article from The Hill. If you're new here, my name is Sean Reynolds. I own a couple of real estate companies, and I read the news. Let's do just that right now. We here in Seattle are experiencing some great weather. I would say it's Florida-like weather, but it's just not quite that warm. And when that happens in mid-April in Seattle, people come out of the woodwork. All of a sudden, everybody's outside. Restaurants are emptied out. Health clubs emptied out. Nobody's there. Everybody's outside because we know here in Seattle, we're getting this teaser weather. It's way too good a weather to be here in April. We're going to have it for like a week. And then we're going to be back to 2-3 months of crappy rain, intermittent rain, clouds, not good weather. But like Florida's got the good weather. We got the good anti-riot law coming. All right. That's what we're doing right now. Florida is on track to implement the anti-riot law. The bill passed mostly along partisan lines in the state's Senate on last Thursday. I'm reading this on a Monday. In a 23-17 vote and has already passed the state's House in a 76-39 vote, the Orlando Sentinel reported. The bill says that a city cannot cut its police budget without approval from the state. I'm okay with that. It also raises the charges for protesters who destroy historical structures, including flags and memorials, to a felony. Fine. Throw them in jail for a long time. Let them think about their misdeeds. Destroying a flag, destroying a memorial, destroying historical structures, that's not peaceful protesting. That's destruction. And we already have laws that cover that. Hey, you can't do that. But apparently, we need to make them more specific. Here's what is going to happen. And that's where I think like Portland is going to be forced to do something where they're going to have to change up the way that they handle with their peaceful protesters. Otherwise, that's going to get even more out of control down there than it already is. The bill also grants civil legal immunity, this is an interesting one, to people who drove through roads that protesters blocked off if they are in danger. They get immunity if they're in danger, and prohibits protesters who get arrested during a riot from posting bail until after their first court date. Hear. Yes, that makes sense. The provision to delay bail is to ensure that a protester does not rejoin the riot. How often does that happen? Yeah, probably all the time, right? Lock them up for a while, let them stew, let them think about their misdeeds. Get them off the street. That's the bottom line. Just get them off the street. Do whatever it takes to get them off the street. Florida is doing just that. Portland, not so much. Seattle, not as much. Not so much. Just not. The charge for battery on a police officer during a riot was also upped. This is a good one. Let me read this one again. The charge for battery on a police officer during a riot was also up to a mandatory 6 months in jail, the state outlet reported. I have been talking about throwing these jackasses in jail for 6 months for like a year. I bring it up. I don't know what, sentencing should be, but to me, all right, if you want to make an impact on somebody, give them 6 months. Maybe they get out in 3, maybe they get out in 2 for good time served, whatever it is. But let them sit there and let them think about that. And as all these other jokers come along, Barney's still in jail. He got busted. You might want to rethink your strategy on that peaceful protesting with that can of soup you've got in your hand. Do you remember over this past weekend, there was literally, I think it was a CNN reporter, guy came by and he's like, yeah, I've got this can of soup. It's for my family. Wink, wink. Can't even wink that well. And clearly he was going to throw it at the cops in a peaceful protest. I mean, a can of soup. That's so wrong in so many ways. How about if the police threw cans of soup at the peaceful protesters? Oof, we are giving you food, free food. We know you don't have jobs. Here's your free food. Can of clam chowder hit somebody in the dome. I mean, this stuff is just so ridiculous. So when we get these mandates for the battery on a police officer during a riot, up to 6 months in jail, good. I'm glad to hear it. Let's keep that going. Let's keep that pattern happening there, Florida. I like it. This legislation strikes the appropriate balance of safeguarding every Floridian's constitutional right to peacefully assemble while ensuring that those who hide behind peaceful protest to cause violence in our communities will be punished. That's what Seattle needs. We need to do that. And we need to do that for small businesses. Hey, if you jack a small business and claim that you're doing some kind of racial protest, here's your punishment. Now, people would say, oh, but you're going to be limiting free speech. Bashing in a window of a storefront of a small business has nothing to do with free speech. It has to do with already violating a law in place. We apparently just need further laws to really clarify, if you're doing this and this happens, here's what happens to you. You go away for a while. We need to just pull these people off the streets. That's bottom line here, right? DeSantis said in a statement, so further, this legislation ensures that no community in the state engages in defunding of their police. That's where this would have been helpful for Seattle, but we didn't end up actually defunding the police by that much. The mayor was like, oh God, I really want to support these peaceful protesters. And I am on board with them, kind of, but I'm a reasonable person. This is the mayor of Seattle speaking. I'm a reasonable person, and I know if we cut the police force by that much more, this is not going to work out well. I'm going to really need to answer to some of the constituents. And even though I'm not running for office again, that's not a good thing. You can't just cut the police force without having a plan in place and implementing something to at least give the notion that you're substituting out some of the cops, right? You want to pull them off? That's fine. Have a game plan. I haven't seen much of a game plan from anybody who's been reimagining or rethinking defunding the police. It's just, you can't, emailing with one of our retired police officers, and we were talking about the park ranger in Portland. One of Portland's big things is we're gonna really ramp up our coverage of park rangers who happen to be unarmed and they don't get a ton of training. But one of the park rangers that I quoted was apparently longtime retired police officer, and he's supposed to be a great dude. And he's like saying, yeah, this park rangers covering the violence spilling into the parks. There's only 3% of the gun violence happening in Portland happens in parks. But yeah, that's what they're doing. Maybe send out some social workers, all right, on those calls where you've got just a mental health situation. Yeah, you need somebody who can understand what's going on in somebody's head or understand, oh my gosh, that person's having a total meltdown. Get them some help, whatever that might be. But I think you also just send out a cop as well, just to make sure all is well, right? I mean, the cop has a gun, something gets out of control. Do you want that person who's having a mental breakdown? And we just read about it in Portland, guy without a shirt, walking around a park. He'd had a gun before. They shot him. He reached down to grab something. Cops didn't know what he was doing. The cops shot him. Because when you've got this narrative of this person may hurt people in the community, he has had a gun, Police aren't taking any risks. But all that gets reported in the major media is unarmed person without a shirt on gets killed. And you don't see all the backstory. And then when you start reading that backstory, that's when you're like, oh, okay. All right. That makes more sense. Okay. And I'm not trying to justify the cops killing anybody, but so often when you start reading that backstory, you're like, oh, oof, all right. This is a little different perspective. This is a little different spin than what major media was giving. That happened? Ooh, yeah. Okay. Well, that puts a little twist on things. How many stories do you read like that? Tons. You get the one headline that just, makes it sound like all cops are, bad, ACAB. And the story, the narrative or the headline makes the police look terrible, makes them just look like cold-blooded murderers. When in reality, you follow that storyline, you're like, oh, okay. Well, that is interesting. That's not good. DeSantis has wanted an anti-riot bill since September after some police brutality protests turned violent over the summer and is expected to sign the bill soon because I think they know stuff is coming with the whole Derek Chauvin, the trial. The end of the trial is here. We are currently right in the process of hearing the final arguments from both sides. And then jury will go into deliberations. And then by the time that you are maybe watching this and this has been released, we might have already had the results from the jury. And, maybe we're in the midst of a bunch of riots. I think that's a very, very likely reality. Democrats were against the bill, this bill we're talking about here in Florida, saying it violated the First Amendment. How does this violate the First Amendment in any way, shape, or form? I have no problem with the First Amendment. I have no problem with people exercising their First Amendment. But bashing in windows and beating on cops and doing all that other nonsense, that isn't really covered under the First Amendment. There's already laws in place that make it illegal for those acts to be done. Now we just got to dial it in a little further. Hey, if you're peacefully protesting and you hit a cop, here's what you get. You get to take a time out. You get to take a state-paid, city-paid time out. Cool your jets. Go hang out in jail for a little while. We'll get back to you. Don't call us. We'll call you. So Democrats against the bill, saying it violated the First Amendment, and some Democratic senators even wore black shirts after the vote to signalize the death of the First Amendment. How ridiculous is that? There's no death of the First Amendment. We're just covering stuff that's illegal already. It's illegal. Now, the whole issue with defunding the police, yeah, you need to get some more input on that because here in Seattle, our city council just, are full of a bunch of Looney Tunes and they just, defund the police, take that money out. And then, this is during a time where crime's going up and we already don't have enough cops on the street. And one of the big things that I took away from an email I got from one of our retired police officers who regularly contributes to the Seattle Real Estate Podcast was just by emailing, emails me a storyline. People, I have a number of cops that email me, police officers, but I feel like it's okay to say cops now. I don't feel like that's I know it used to be a derogatory comment, and the big one when I was a kid that was a huge no-no was referring to police officers as a PIG. And that was a huge no-no in my family. And I'm not really sure why that was because it was very derogatory. But that was a real big thing at the time. And my mom, since she's Australian, she was always trying to figure out, all right, what's the social protocol here? Because she didn't grow up here and things are different in America. And so, you just didn't really say those things. But one of the things that I took away from interaction that I've had is that the police are spread so thin that they don't have the time to be able to do the reach out that they once did to the community. They're hustling from call to call. and they don't have a chance to follow up. And so I think a lot of the interactions that are happening now are by rushed cops who just kind of got to do the best they can. And maybe their bedside manner isn't the greatest, but they're hustling between calls and they're like, all right, we got another jerk off to deal with, and they just don't have that time because there's so few of them on the streets. There aren't enough of them on the streets to basically keep like a Seattle and a Portland and an LA, not enough of them to keep those cities safe with the amount of stuff going on, violence and protesting and all this, that they don't have the ability to have that bedside manner of telling people, hey, here's the good that we do as well. Here are things that we are here to help you out with. We're here to de-escalate this situation. Let us handle it. You did a great job calling 911, getting us here. Here's what we're going to do. And so many crimes basically go unsolved or they don't even get prosecuted because they're not high in the priority list. And the only crimes that are getting worked on here in Seattle and like Portland are the major ones, are the big ones, the big ticket items. Because you got to prioritize. When you don't have enough cops on the street, you got to prioritize what you are going to cover. So make that the bigger ones, the felonies and all that stuff. And in the meantime, Portland, Seattle is like, decriminalizing all the drugs and decriminalizing basic crime, because that's how you get your crime statistics to become lower. Don't actually, work on the root cause of the problem. Just make the criminal charges no longer criminal. That seems to be, a real way to handle things. And I read that and I see these articles and I'm like, is anybody else watching this? Is anybody else kind of thinking that this might not end well? I mean, the crime still goes on. I did a podcast the other day where the small business groups were saying, all right, here's all the crimes that we had happen that we know of. Here's what the police reported. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that these businesses, they're fatigued calling the cops because they know not much is going to happen. These aren't major charges, yet they're happening and they're impacting business. Anytime somebody gets graffitied, anytime somebody gets their windows bashed in, maybe some kind of weird interaction with their clientele or their employees, you've got that going on between the homelessness and that and all these other influences, businesses being shut down. It's a lot for a small business to endure. And so they kind of give up calling the police. They kind of get to a point and they're like, okay, we know this is the crime going on, but we're not even reporting it because what's the point? Why take that extra step when I've already got to deal with painting the outside of the building I'm in and taking out that graffiti, or I've got to deal with getting that window put back in, or I got to deal with, hey, we think that the peaceful protesters are going to come by again. We need to put up some wood. All that stuff takes resources. All that stuff takes money. And so if you are going to make a futile call to the police, maybe you don't make that futile call. And that's what we're saying is happening, is that there's way more crime going on. And it looks like crime is, statistically, wow, Seattle's doing pretty good. Portland. Yeah, you can't hide the whole gun violence thing happening in Portland. And so many people are like, oh, guns don't shoot people. People shoot people. Yes, but you know what we're talking about. We're talking about people with guns doing violent things to each other, namely shooting each other. And those statistics you cannot hide. They are off the hook in Portland. They're on pace for record numbers, and that's not a good thing. Gun violence, you never want to have that in record numbers. So the Texas Senate passed a bill on Tuesday that would also allow only police budgets to be cut if voted on by the community. I'm okay with that because what we've got going on in Seattle is our, city council just kind of, well, we don't really like the cops. They're not within our game plan. They don't, we like them when we need to call 911 for ourselves personally. But, for the community, we want to defund those police because they're bad. When we need them personally, good. Community, bad, let's defund them. And then we'll just work out, how they're going to come and take care of us when the bad man comes and we, Johnny on the spot, call 911. That seems to be literally what's going on with Seattle City Council members. We've had a number of instances of that where there's been some kind of crime or something and city council members like, I need you to follow up on that. Good luck with that. It's probably not happening. Cops got other stuff to do. Yeah, anything but handle your case because you defunded the police and there aren't enough police on the ground to keep the city safe. And I know that sounds like, oh, that's just a fear tactic, Sean. Well, look at the numbers. Look at the numbers it takes to keep a city safe. If you analyze those numbers and you will look at Portland and you look at a Seattle and you'll go, okay, it does not appear as we have enough police on the ground to handle all this. Don't have the bandwidth. So again, it goes back to, I think that's one of the reasons that we're having all these shootings. It's because nobody trusts anybody. And the cops are doing the best they can, but they're freaked out. And guess what? There's enough Looney Tune people out there with guns, knives, whatever, that the cops are making some judgment calls. Sometimes it goes the wrong way. Not trying to justify police brutality in any way, shape, or form, but I think all of this stuff, it all works together. It's all interrelated. And so when you've got these tired cops out there doing their thing, maybe they've had a ton of overtime. There's some decisions being made that clearly, nobody can say, what do you say to some of these situations that happen when people get shot and killed? It happens. You're going to have that happen. It's just, you can't not have that happen in a lot of these circumstances because the folks that you're talking about, we had a guy down on the waterfront in Seattle, guy that was suffering from some mental health care issues, and he had a knife and he was going after people, and he basically told the police, just get it over with, just shoot me. And he went for somebody and they shot him. So that kind of stuff happening on the regular. So it doesn't surprise me that Texas Senate is doing their kind of thing to only allow police budgets to be cut if voted on by the community. And then also Florida coming up with some different ways to handle this. I wish Portland, I wish Seattle would do the same thing. Hey, if you bash in a store window and we catch you, 6 months. Hey, if you graffiti up something, we're going to let you cool your jets for a solid 6 weeks. Mandatory. Let's do that. Keep those folks off the street. Let them think about it the next time that they're going to do that. Because what they're doing has nothing to do with First Amendment rights. Tagging ACAB on a building wall, that doesn't count. That's just straight up graffiti. No, you can't call it art because it doesn't look all that great. It's just ACAB, right? You know what I mean? And defacing a public building, I'm just a no-go. It just looks crappy. It looks terrible. If it's on an area where that's what's going on and it's pretty graffiti, and you know what I mean by that, by like it's artistic and it's supposed to be there, I'm okay with that. But when you're in a public area and you've got a bunch of graffiti and a bunch of garbage out and a bunch of tents, what does that say about a city? It says city doesn't give a rip. It's like anything goes. We're just going to tolerate this because we're tolerant here, and that's what tolerant people do. Crazy times, right? Just did a podcast, the one right before this, and we were talking about how one of the homeless encampments got swept out over this past weekend, actually on Friday. I'm recording this on a Monday for you. And one of the homeless encampments, it got swept out. You can catch that podcast. While another homeless encampment next to a middle school is going to be allowed to remain there as the kids, as little Johnny and little Susie go back to school. That'll be an interesting one to watch because I wouldn't want my kid, experiencing that kind of influence. It's like, why are all the adults living in tents out there? Why are they always squabbling over stuff? What's going on? How come the ambulance comes pretty often to those guys over there? Stuff that shouldn't be happening, that is. So on these peaceful protesters that end up being 99.999% of the time not so peaceful, I'd like to see some more stiff sentences, shall we say? Let's increase the commitment to peaceful protesting by upping what we got to do. Kind of get rid of this stuff, right? Or something. deter people from their peaceful protesting. All right, that's it for me on this one. I don't think we're going to see any deterrent. We're not here in Seattle, not in Portland. They're going to say, First Amendment rights, they've got them. That's peaceful protesting. The whole bashing out of the windows, that's a different story. We're not really going to get into that because we only deal with the peaceful protesters. So you're going to have to take that up with this other entity over there, or that other entity over there, or that one way over there, because that's not within our division. And that's the game that is being played. All right, that's it for me. What I do know that I'm sure of, as this storyline continues, I'll bring it to you right here on the Seattle Real Estate Podcast. Thanks so much for being here. I'd love to have you share the content. I'm hearing more and more from people that, hey, I used to be subscribed to you. I used to have the notification bell clicked so that I could get notified each time your content came out. And I would like videos, as often as I could. But I'm hearing from a lot of folks, and this is happening to a lot of podcasters, video guys in my position, that YouTube is, there's something going on and people aren't being notified that their videos are getting out there. So check that out. Love to have you hit the notification bell if you haven't, and subscribe if you haven't. Thanks so much. Again, I'm Sean Reynolds from Summit Properties Northwest, Reynolds & Kline Appraisal, and your host. Thanks so much for being here. We'll catch up soon. Bye. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you'll know when our next video is out.